Hi everyone, so the goal of this video is to look at the nervous system organization. So your learning targets are to explain the functions of the nervous system and define central nervous system and peripheral nervous system and list their major parts. Now if you're in class, this slideshow will look very familiar and so you might be able to breeze through it, but nevertheless here it is and there'll be some guided notes that go with this video. All right, so first thing, when we talk about the functions of the nervous system, there's a few major functions, and you can kind of see that they're all going to be related to each other. And this picture in the top right is a good summary of those major functions. So the first thing is it gathers sensory input. So you have sensory input through your eyes, your nose, your ears, any kind of touch, pain, temperature. There are actually many different senses and you have millions of sensory receptors. So that is kind of like the first thing that the nervous system does. It has to gain some information from its surroundings or even information from inside your own body. So again, millions of sensory receptors, and this is all just called sensory input. And then your brain has to process and interpret all that sensory information. What's important, what's not important, how big of a deal is this, how do I respond? Some of these things become so automatic to us. Like when we hear our name in a conversation, our ears kind of perk up, like we kind of notice it. There are all kinds of little things like that where our brain is constantly interpreting the information that is being sent to it. And then finally, you might want to respond in a certain way. So when it's interpreting the information, it's deciding if anything should be done. If something should be done, then that's what we call the response, and that's what we call the output. So that might be some kind of motor output. Maybe we move a muscle, maybe we flinch, whatever the output is. It could be many different things, not just muscles, but it could also be glands, things that maybe we don't really think about, things that we don't really control. It could be like cardiac muscle, it could be smooth muscle. So there are many different responses that our body can have to different sensory input. Well, those are your three major functions of your nervous system. All right, when it comes to the structural organization, there's two major parts that you want to consider. There's the central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system. So central is just your brain and your spinal cord. And so really when I'm looking at these things, I'm really just looking at this part, the upper part of the picture. We'll get to the bottom part in a few minutes here. And then the peripheral nervous system is pretty much anything that is not the brain and the spinal cord, particularly nerves that are going throughout your body. It could be sensory nerves and neurons. It could be motor neurons, but these are all things that are not part of the brain and the spinal cord. They're in constant communication with each other, back and forth, but those are two separate systems within the nervous system. And so again, for any of you visual people, the orange here is the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. And then the peripheral nervous system is all the yellow. All right, you have many different nerves that kind of extend throughout your body, kind of away from this central part of your body. All right, and then if we looked at the kind of more functional organization of the nervous system, we'd be looking at kind of like the sensory division and the motor division. So the sensory division, kind of as we referred to before, it's sending information to the central nervous system, sometimes abbreviated as CNS. So sensory division is sending information up through the peripheral nervous system and then to the spinal cord and to the brain. And again, there's many different sensory organs and sensory neurons throughout your body. So again, eyes, nose, skin, muscles, there's probably many others. And then finally, the motor division is where there's going to be some kind of motion or some kind of maybe emotion or maybe some other action that takes place, but your brain and your body decide that there must be some kind of action. And so that signal gets sent from the brain down the spinal cord and then to maybe a motor neuron or something else in your body. All right, so that information is going from the central nervous system and then out to the rest of the body. So sensory is information in, motor is information out. And then one thing I'll point out here is that there's actually two subdivisions of the motor division. And you can kind of see that in this picture here. There's the somatic, which is like voluntary. So that could be a skeletal muscle if you decide to move something. If someone calls your name and maybe you turn your head because you hear your name, right? That is just a simple example of a voluntary motion. And then there might be things that are autonomic, right? Auto, think about something that kind of happens on its own, kind of like automatic. So it's kind of like involuntary. It's something that you don't really have any control over. It could be something that signals your cardiac muscle. Maybe something happens where your heart's going to start beating faster. Maybe a message gets sent to your smooth muscles, like in your digestive system, or something gets sent to your glands. But these are all involuntary actions. But again, it's still part of the motor division. So those are your major parts of the nervous system. So keep in mind, these are the two separate kind of systems within the nervous system, central and peripheral. Within the peripheral nervous system, two major components are sensory and motor. And then motor itself can be broken down into two components, things that are voluntary and things that are involuntary. There's something down here called parasympathetic and sympathetic. We might get to that later on in the year or in this unit, but we'll get to there soon enough. But those are the major things I want you to remember when you think about how the nervous system is organized. Those are your major ideas. All right, that's it.